the keys to higher awareness are basically, number one is banish all doubt about who you are. And any information that comes at you, you want to be able to use this thing that we call a knowing. A knowing. A knowing means that you have no doubts. Shakespeare said, "Our doubts are our traitors." It's an internal knowing that who I am is divine and capable of manifesting and attracting anything I want for myself in my life. It's a knowing. And whatever it is that comes at me, and this really ties in with Wishes Fulfilled and the 5 principles of placing into your imagination a knowing. Everything that now exists was once imagined. Therefore, anything that is ever going to exist must first be imagined. You cannot create anything for yourself unless you first expect it of yourself. If you don't expect it of yourself, you cannot create it. Because everything that shows up in the physical world is manifested from the world of spirit. In the 40th verse of the Tao, it says, all being originates in non-being. So into non-being, you must place a knowing. And that's what I tried to tell Betty DeGeneres last night before the phone said no, is don't say, I am healing. I am healed. I am well. I am well. And then you will begin to act upon I am well. It's like I say about becoming an expert. You become an expert by declaring yourself to be an expert and saying, I am and in this area that I feel excitement about. I am an expert in it. By declaring yourself to be an expert in it, you don't have to tell anybody else about your expertise. You don't have to show off about it. You declare yourself to be an expert in it, and then you will act upon that declaration, which is an I am within you, which is God. I am. I am expert. And as you place that into your imagination and live from that place, which is the second of the Wishes Fulfilled Foundations, it's a chapter in the book, you will then begin to act upon what is already there. He calls those things which do not exist as though they did. You must call what does not exist yet in the physical world as if it did already. Okay? So it's banishing doubt. The second Ken and I talked about well into the night, that night, is that you have to cultivate the witness. Cultivating the witness means that you step outside of the physical domain that you are in, you step outside of your physical body, and you begin to observe what your body is doing and what you are telling yourself and all of the things that you see out there from the place of non-identification with it. You are the observer. You are the noticer. And as you notice it, you just begin to realize that what it says in quantum physics is true, that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that's a truth. That's a quantum truth, that the way that you observe something affects what you are observing. That's true in quantum physics. Just the nature of how you observe something changes what you are observing. Our linear mind cannot accept that or wrap itself around that kind of an idea. But in quantum physics, they've got all kinds of proof that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The world changes. If you believe you live in a supportive universe that is there to support and be with and be a foundation for what it is that you want to create, that is what you will attract into your life. That's how the universal consciousness works. The third of them is that you tame the ego. And I've talked enough about that here on this ship. You tame the ego, which means that you work. It's what I did in the bathroom that I told you about the other day, in the toilet, is that you tame the ego. You stop telling yourself, that I am better than, that I have, that I am all of these things, what I own, what I do, what I accomplish, what other people think of me. You tame that part of you, and you practice what Lao Tzu called radical humility. Radical humility. And the fourth is what we're going to do now. It's called shutting down the inner dialogue. That's the fourth key to higher awareness. Banish the doubt, cultivate the witness, tame the ego, shut down the inner dialogue. You've got to go to silence. It's the silence between the notes that makes the music. You cannot create without going there. I would encourage you to very strongly make a practice of having some quiet time every single day.
In a world that never stops moving, stillness becomes the rarest form of wisdom. We are taught to chase, to climb, to hustle, to conquer. But the soul, your eternal essence, is not impressed by noise. It doesn't race. It doesn't strive. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And in the hush between your thoughts, in the quiet after the questions, that's where the soul begins to speak. Clarity is not something you achieve. It's something you remember. You were born with it, wrapped in simplicity, bathed in presence, untouched by confusion. But as the world's volume turned up, as expectations piled upon you like bricks on the chest of your spirit, the clarity was buried beneath it all. Not lost, just waiting. Waiting for you to be still enough to feel it again. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of awareness. It is the moment when you are no longer doing life, but being life. And in that being, the fog lifts. You begin to see, not with the eyes, but with the heart. Not with logic, but with knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't require proof because it is truth. Most people confuse clarity with answers. They think they'll feel clear once they figure it all out, once the past is explained, the future guaranteed, the pain justified. But clarity is not born in solving. It is born in surrender. When you stop clenching the steering wheel of your life so tightly, when you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world, something miraculous happens, peace walks in. And where peace goes, clarity follows. Let us remember the truth known by sages and saints. You are not here to figure life out. You are here to feel it, to open to it, to soften into it like water returning to the sea. The need for control is the ego's obsession, but the soul has no such hunger. It doesn't need to control. It already belongs. It doesn't need to prove it already is. It doesn't need to race. It already rests. Your inner chaos is not because life is chaotic. It's because you've been avoiding the sacred space within you, the silence. You've been filling every crack in your day with noise, distraction, validation. But clarity doesn't rise through effort. It rises through stillness. It doesn't come from pushing. It comes from pausing. And in that pause, you meet yourself again. You were never meant to carry the world on your shoulders. The world is not yours to control. It's yours to experience, to love, to witness, and to let pass through you like wind through an open field. When you sit in stillness, you remember this. You remember that life is not a storm to be survived, but a breeze to be felt. And in feeling it fully, you return to the truth that you were never disconnected, just distracted. Distraction is the greatest thief of clarity, not because it takes something from you, but because it turns your gaze away from what was always there. Like the sun hidden behind clouds, your light never left. It was only obscured by thought, fear, busyness. And when you finally get still, the clouds part, not all at once, but gently, respectfully, like a curtain rising to reveal your own divinity waiting patiently behind the veil. The stillness does not shout, it does not force, it invites, and it waits, always waits for you to accept. Not when the to-do list is done, not when the circumstances are perfect, but now in the breath you are taking. Now in the space between your thoughts. Now in the sacred pause where the mind rests and the soul wakes. And in this waking, something changes. You stop asking life to be different. You stop begging the moment to become something else. You begin instead to listen. To listen not with your ears, but with your entire being. You begin to hear the language of the soul, the language of stillness, and it tells you what no amount of striving could ever reveal. That you are safe, that you are loved, that you are already whole. Stillness is not a task. It is a homecoming, a return, a remembrance of who you were before the world told you who you should be. It is the falling away of every label, every mask, every identity constructed from fear. And as it all falls, what remains is essence. What remains is God not outside you, but in you. As you, moving through you, breathing you, being you. And in this sacred space, clarity is no longer something you seek. It becomes what you are. Let the world keep spinning. Let the chaos outside dance its wild, unpredictable dance. You don't need to control the storm. You only need to find the eye of it, the center. And that center is always still, that center is always you. So sit, breathe, be, and in that stillness, let the illusions dissolve. Let the old stories, the ones that said you're not enough, not worthy, not capable, let them fall like leaves in autumn, no longer needed for the soul's blooming. You are not your past. You are not your fear. You are not the noise of the world. You are the silence beneath it. You are the space between the notes, the rhythm that gives the music its meaning. You see now why clarity cannot be forced? Why it resists the grasping of the mind and instead flows through the openness of the heart? Because clarity is not information, it is transformation. It does not fill you, it empties you. And in that emptiness, you finally feel light enough to rise. You become like a feather surrendered to the wind, not passive, not powerless, but free. Free from the illusion that you need to have it all figured out. Free from the belief that healing requires effort. Free from the ego's insistence that you must earn peace. You don't earn peace, you return to it. You don't achieve clarity, you allow it. And all of it begins in stillness. So if you are weary, sit. If you are confused, sit. If you are broken, grieving, lost, overwhelmed, sit. Not to escape, not to avoid, but to arrive. Stillness is the most radical arrival. It is where you meet life without agenda, where you stop trying to be anything and remember you are already everything. In stillness, the soul speaks, and it speaks in a language beyond words, a language made of feeling, of knowing, of being. And what it whispers is this: you are already home. What if the very thing you've been searching for has been searching for you too, not in the noise, not in the chase, but in the quiet you keep avoiding? What if stillness is not just a spiritual practice, but a doorway, a sacred threshold where the divine and the human meet, where the veil thins and truth is no longer something you read about, but something you feel vibrating through the marrow of your being? There's a reason the great mystics sat in silence. There's a reason the prophets wandered the desert. There's a reason the sages withdrew from the noise of cities and climbed mountains to find God. It's not because the divine is far. It's because the world is loud, too loud to hear the subtle beauty of the eternal that whispers from within, too loud to feel the sacred pulse of presence moving in every breath, too loud to hear the soul say, I'm still here. I never left. You just forgot how to listen. You don't need a new path. You need a deeper presence. You don't need to run forward. You need to fall inward, into the holy quiet where your spirit waits patiently behind the storm of your thoughts, into the inner sanctuary where truth does not arrive dressed in certainty, but in peace. And that peace, that gentle presence, is the language of clarity. It does not bark orders or deliver perfect blueprints. It simply clears the debris so the light can shine again. And you have always been that light. The confusion, the anxiety, the overthinking, those are just clouds. And clouds, no matter how dark, can never extinguish the sun. The sun just waits. Still, constant, glowing behind the storm, your soul is that sun. Not in need of fixing, just waiting to be seen again. The world has conditioned you to think answers are earned by effort, that truth is something you must chase, something out there just beyond your reach. But the spiritual life is not about chasing anything. It is about remembering what is already within. It is the sacred reversal, the path not of gaining, but of shedding, of unlearning the noise. So you can return to the knowing. And it takes courage to be still. It takes courage to stop distracting yourself with the next thing, the next goal, the next identity. Because when you finally sit in silence, you meet yourself, not the self you show the world, not the self you've polished and performed, but the raw, trembling, holy self that has been whispering beneath the surface all along. Stillness is not easy. It confronts, it reveals, it humbles, it strips away everything that is false. It forces you to see the parts of yourself you've buried beneath achievement and validation. But it is in this seeing, this honest, sacred witnessing, that you begin to return home. And that homecoming is clarity. Not the clarity that gives you all the answers, but the clarity that says, you don't need them, you already are the answer. There's a kind of wisdom that lives in the quiet. It cannot be found in books or sermons or lectures. It is not taught, it is remembered. It is the wisdom of the trees that do not try to grow, but grow. The rivers that do not try to flow, but flow. The stars that do not try to shine, but shine. What makes them divine is not effort, but essence. And what makes you divine is not your doing, but your being. You are the tree, you are the river, you are the star, and you are never more aligned with the truth of life than when you are still enough to simply be. Sit with that. Let it break open the armor of your striving. Let it dissolve the illusion that your worth is somewhere ahead of you. Let it remind you that clarity is not the reward for working harder, but the revelation that comes when you finally stop. And the moment you stop, truly stop, you start to see, you see that your worth has never been in your productivity, that your value has never been in your accomplishments, that your purpose is not something you chase, but something you remember. And what you remember in the stillness is this: you are already whole. You are already held. You are already here. And here is where everything begins. When the mind gets quiet, the heart begins to speak. And it speaks in a different language, a softer one. It doesn't argue or compare or worry. It doesn't say when or if or someday. It says now. It says yes. It says I am. And this I am is the most powerful prayer you will ever whisper. It is not a begging of life to become something else. It is a full-bodied return to what already is. It is the dissolving of ego into essence. It is the surrender of resistance into rest. It is the moment you stop pushing the river and let yourself be carried. So sit. Sit like the mountain sits. Sit like the moon watches. Sit like the ocean waits. Not to escape life, but to merge with it. To merge with the still, unshaken, eternal pulse that has always been inside you. Clarity does not always come in lightning bolts. Sometimes it arrives like dew, soft, slow, and silent, but it nourishes, it renews, it awakens the parts of you that were never dead, just dormant. And in that awakening, you come alive, not as someone else, but as more fully yourself. There is no rush. There is only rhythm, the rhythm of breath, the rhythm of being, the rhythm of love that has no opposite because it was never conditional. The stillness teaches this. It shows you that underneath all your trying is a truth that never needed to be earned. You are the clarity. You are the peace. You are the stillness. And when you stop long enough to feel that, not just understand it, but truly feel it, you begin to live, not from fear, but from presence. Not from need, but from fullness. Not from ego, but from soul. And the soul, the soul does not rush. The soul knows. The soul flows. The soul rests in the silence because it remembers what the mind forgets, that God is not somewhere else. God is here in the stillness, in the breath, in the now. There's something sacred about silence that terrifies the ego. The ego feeds on noise, on proving, achieving, calculating, defending. But the soul is nourished by stillness. The soul doesn't compete. It doesn't grasp or argue, it simply is. It breathes with the universe. It aligns with the eternal. It remembers. And the more you allow yourself to be still, the more you realize how loud your life had become. Not just in volume, but in expectation. Every moment stacked with demands, every thought laced with pressure, every breath taken like it had to accomplish something. But stillness says otherwise. Stillness says, come as you are, let go of the armor, lay down the need to be more than you are in this moment. It's enough. You're enough. You see, clarity doesn't need you to be perfect. It only needs you to be present. Present enough to witness what's been underneath all along. Not the story of who you think you are, but the truth of what you've always been, the presence behind the personality, the awareness behind the thoughts, the light behind the identity. When you return to stillness, you return to yourself. Not the self shaped by fear or comparison or past wounds, but the self with a capital S, the infinite spark that existed before the world had a name for you. And that spark doesn't flicker, it burns steady. Even when the mind is in chaos, the soul remains calm. Even when life is uncertain, the spirit stays whole. But we forget, we get caught in the swirl. We mistake the turbulence of our thoughts for the truth of our being, and in that forgetting, we suffer. We chase things that cannot fill us. We climb ladders that lead nowhere. We try to quiet the noise with more noise, but the answer has never changed. The way home has never moved. It waits, always waits in the quiet. So sit in the discomfort if it's there. Sit in the emptiness if that's what rises. Sit even when the mind screams that you should be doing something, especially then, because the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment you begin to heal. Stillness is not passive. It is the most radical form of alignment. It is choosing to return when the world tells you to run. It is saying, I trust the silence more than the shouting. And in that trust, clarity emerges. Not as a lightning strike, but as a soft unfolding like petals opening to the sun, one breath at a time. Do you feel it? That gentle remembering that you don't have to strive to be worthy? That quiet hum beneath your rib cage that says you're not broken, just buried? That sacred pull inward that whispers, stop trying, just be? That's clarity rising. That's your soul stepping forward after years of waiting for you to pause, to listen, to come home. Because the soul cannot shout over the ego. It will never fight for your attention. It will simply wait. It will wait while you exhaust yourself with proving. It will wait while you perform for love. It will wait while you carry burdens that were never yours to carry. And when you finally put them down, when you sit in the stillness long enough to hear the silence, it will gently say, welcome back. There is no punishment for forgetting, only pain. The pain of being disconnected from your own light. But that pain too is a teacher. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to guide you not toward more doing, but toward deeper being. Every ache, every doubt, every unraveling moment is a breadcrumb leading you back to the stillness where clarity lives. And when you enter that space, something sacred happens. You stop asking life for explanations. You stop begging the universe to make it make sense. You begin instead to trust, not because you have the answers, but because you no longer need them. You begin to feel the subtle but unshakable truth that you are guided, that you are carried, that you are enough. The world outside may still be loud, but the world within becomes your sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, everything changes. Not because life changes, but because you see it differently. You see it through the eyes of presence, through the lens of love, through the truth of your soul, which was never confused, only unheard. And so you walk differently. You speak with more softness. You listen with more depth. You move with more grace. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you're no longer trying to be anything else. You are finally being what you are, a sacred thread in the fabric of existence, a note in the great song of creation, a soul remembering its light. Stillness teaches you that nothing is missing, that you don't need to chase alignment. You need only remove the noise that's hiding it. You don't need to create purpose. You need only feel the pulse of it that's always been within you. Let go of the idea that clarity is something to be earned. It is not a prize. It is a presence. It arises when you are brave enough to stop, open enough to listen, soft enough to feel. It flows in like a tide, not when you command it, but when you invite it. And it washes away everything that was never true. In the stillness, illusions dissolve, masks fall, armor melts. You become transparent to yourself. And in that transparency, there is nothing left to defend, nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove. There is only truth. And the truth is that you are already whole. You always have been. Stillness does not change your life by adding more to it. It changes your life by taking away what never belonged. The false urgency, the inherited fear, the borrowed dreams, the narratives handed to you by a world that confused motion for meaning. Stillness is the great purifier. It doesn't decorate the cage, it dissolves it. And what's left when the cage dissolves? Freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't shout or need permission. The kind of freedom that doesn't come with flags or declarations. The kind of freedom that lives in your breath. Quiet, sacred, unmistakable. It's the freedom of no longer being pulled in 1,000 directions. The freedom of finally hearing your own voice again after years of listening to everyone else's. The freedom of remembering that you are allowed to choose peace over performance. When you begin to live from stillness, you no longer crave validation in the same way. You no longer bend yourself into versions that fit the room. You no longer ask people to fill the void that only presence can hold. Because you've tasted something deeper. You've touched the well beneath the world's thirst. You've returned to the source, not in theory, but in living, breathing reality. And from that place, everything changes. You love without attachment. You speak without trying to impress. You listen without waiting to respond. You no longer react, you respond. Because you are no longer driven by unconscious stories. You are awake now, rooted, still. Clarity strips away the unnecessary. It reveals the essence. And when you see with essence, you don't just see more clearly, you see more kindly. You look at your pain with tenderness instead of judgment. You hold your past with compassion instead of shame. You see other people's anger as fear, their cruelty as confusion, their arrogance as woundedness. And you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Stillness births this kind of clarity. Not the kind that just makes decisions easier, but the kind that makes the heart softer. The kind that lets you walk through the same world, but with entirely new eyes, eyes that see through illusion, that recognize divine patterns in chaos, that find peace not in the absence of noise, but in the presence of awareness. There is a sacred intelligence moving through this universe. Call it God, call it source, call it life. It is not random, it is not cruel, it is precise, gentle, profoundly aware of what your soul came here to remember. But it doesn't force you. It invites you. It will not wrestle your will to the ground. It will wait. And it waits in the quiet. You want to know who you are? Then be still. Don't just sit with the question. Become the space that no longer needs to ask. That's what stillness does. It doesn't answer your questions, it dissolves them. It doesn't fix your brokenness, it reveals that you were never broken. It doesn't give you new ideas, it clears the fog so truth can rise. Like the sun rising not because it's told to, but because it's what it does. You are not here to be a performer on life's stage. You are not here to be constantly visible, constantly relevant, constantly productive. You are here to be real, to be awake, to be so rooted in truth that nothing outside you has the power to uproot you. And that kind of rootedness comes not from willpower, but from stillness. It's in stillness that you remember the rhythm of life, the inhale and exhale, the expansion and the return, the rise and the rest. You were never meant to run endlessly forward. You were designed to pause, to reflect, to listen, to let the tide carry you back inward before you reach again outward. The clarity that comes in stillness is not about making better plans. It's about no longer needing a plan to feel safe. It's about trusting the unfolding, about letting go of your white-knuckled grip on how you think it should go and leaning fully into the mystery. Because the mystery is not your enemy. It is the birthplace of grace. Do not fear the unknown. Fear missing it. Fear becoming so busy, so distracted, so addicted to noise that you never hear the invitation hiding beneath the surface of your life. The invitation to come home, not to a house, not to a person, not to a belief, but to the timeless space within you that has never been touched by fear. That place is still. That place is whole. That place is where clarity lives. And once you live from that space, the world no longer controls your peace. You no longer chase love, you become it. You no longer fear endings, you trust transitions. You no longer resist what is, you flow with it. And in that flow, everything sacred becomes visible again. The ordinary becomes holy. The mundane becomes miraculous. And so the invitation remains, be still. Not because it's trendy, not because it's spiritual, but because your soul remembers the language of silence. And it's time you did too. You won't find yourself in the next breakthrough, the next relationship, the next success. You will find yourself when you stop running. When you sit in the quiet with nothing to prove, nowhere to get, no one to become. And in that sitting, you will hear the oldest truth echo through your being. You are always it. You are always enough. You are always home. So now, as the breath slows and the noise begins to fade into the background once more, you find yourself standing not at the end, but at the return. The return to what was always real, always waiting, always whispering beneath the rush of the world. This is not a conclusion. This is the moment when all the seeking dissolves and only the stillness remains. And in that stillness, everything becomes clear. You don't need to make life perfect. You don't need to fix every flaw or heal every ache before you are allowed to be at peace. You are allowed now. Not after the storm in it, not once clarity comes, but because clarity comes when you stop demanding it and begin allowing it. The stillness does not erase the journey. It blesses it. It gathers every shattered moment and folds it into a single quiet truth. Nothing was wasted. Every detour was a teacher. Every heartbreak was a mirror. Every silence you avoided was a door back to yourself. You ran, yes. You stumbled. You forgot. But the soul never left you. It simply waited. And now you are ready to listen again. And what does the soul say? It doesn't give you instructions. It doesn't hand you a map. It doesn't require that you understand. It only asks that you trust. Trust the pause. Trust the breath. Trust the invisible rhythm that life has been moving to all along, even when you couldn't hear the music. Let the stillness be your sanctuary now. Let it be your teacher, your guide, your anchor, not once in a while, but always. Let it meet you in the morning before your thoughts begin. Let it hold you at night when your fears return. Let it be the space you return to when the world demands your performance. And you remember, I am not a role. I am not an idea. I am not what others need me to be. I am presence itself. And presence does not perform. Clarity is not a light that flickers on and off depending on your worthiness. It is always shining. It is always speaking. It is we who turn away, we who drown it out. We who run, not because we are lost, but because we forgot we already belong. And now, beloved soul, you remember that silence is not empty, it is full. You remember that surrender is not weakness, it is power. You remember that the pause is not the absence of progress, it is the birth of purpose. You remember that nothing outside you needs to change for you to return home. Because home is not a place, it is a presence. And it lives in you, right here, right now. It always did. So walk on, not with certainty, but with clarity. Not with all the answers, but with the knowing that you are allowed to not know and still be deeply, beautifully whole. Speak less to convince. Listen more to understand. Create not to impress, but to express. Love, not for what it brings back to you, but for the miracle of what it brings out of you. You do not need to be louder, you need to be truer. You do not need to be seen more, you need to see more. You do not need more power, you need deeper peace. And all of it begins and ends in the stillness you were once afraid to sit in. Now you know better. Stillness is not where you lose yourself, it's where you find yourself again. Not the self the world taught you to perform, but the real self, the quiet self, the eternal self, the self that does not need to be explained, only remembered. And so let your next breath be not a rush toward answers, but a return to presence. Let your next moment be not another chase for clarity, but a sacred pause where clarity finds you. You are not here to waste time. You are here to touch eternity, and you do so every time you choose to be still. So be still now, not because the world told you to rest, but because your soul remembered it could. Let this be the moment you stop waiting to arrive and realize you already have. Let this be the end of searching and the beginning of being. Clarity has come, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you stopped, because you listened, because you remembered who you are. And who you are is enough. Always was, always will be, and now you know it. Clarity comes in the stillness. And in that stillness, you are finally free. There comes a moment in every life when the soul whispers softly at first that something isn't right, that despite the things you've gathered, the achievements you've counted, the steps you've followed, something remains untouched, unawakened, unfulfilled. Not because life has failed you, but because your thoughts have not yet remembered their power. You see, you are not merely a body moving through the world. You are a field of consciousness creating it. And the lens through which you look at the world, your thoughts, is not a passive reflection of life, but the very projector of its quality. What you think is not just commentary, it's alchemy. You don't see things as they are. You see things as you are through the stories you've chosen, through the meanings you've inherited, through the emotions you allow to linger like smoke in the chambers of your mind. Your outer world is always mirroring the dominant vibration of your inner world. And your thinking, moment by moment, is the tuning fork. The universe, being eternally impartial, says only this: as you believe, so shall it be done unto you. You are not what the world calls you. You are not your name, your title, your reputation, or your fears. You are the thinker behind the thoughts, the dreamer behind the mask, the awareness, watching it all unfold, and waiting, always waiting, for you to reclaim your authorship of this life. Most people never pause to wonder, who is doing the thinking in here? And where did these thoughts come from? They repeat patterns like a song stuck on repeat. Songs of lack, of worry, of comparison, of judgment, never realizing that they are dancing to music. They never chose that their mind has become a house built by strangers, and now they live inside it, calling it truth. But thought is not fixed. It is fluid. It can be questioned, it can be healed, it can be elevated, and when it is, life itself begins to take a new shape. The quality of your life is not determined by the conditions you're in, but by the conversations you're having with yourself about those conditions. It's not the storm that breaks you. It's the belief that you cannot sail through it. Begin to listen, truly listen, to the voice that speaks just beneath the noise, the still, silent knowing that's always been with you. It doesn't shout, it doesn't panic, it doesn't echo the world's madness. It simply reminds you, you are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses which thoughts get to stay. And that is the first liberation, to recognize that you are not a prisoner of your thinking. You are its master. But mastery begins with awareness. Every moment you catch yourself thinking a thought that limits you, a thought that shrinks your spirit or dim your light, is a holy moment, a spiritual opportunity. Not to shame yourself, but to remember yourself. To remember that no one installed that thought without your permission, and that now, in this breath, you can choose again. The quality of your life is not waiting at the end of some distant achievement. It is shaped, molded in the unseen furnace of your inner dialogue. Do you feed the flame of resentment? Do you pour gasoline on thoughts of fear, of not being enough, of being left behind? Do you carry the past into today like a sack of stones, repeating, "This is just how I am," as if your identity were carved in stone rather than breathed into being? Or do you wake up each morning and choose a new vibration? Do you speak to yourself with love before the world gets a chance to interfere? Do you plant thoughts of peace, joy, forgiveness, and water them with presence until they bloom into a life that reflects your soul? Most people treat thoughts like facts, but thoughts are just clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. You are not the cloud, you are the sky. And in that realization, you are free. Let me ask you gently, what have you been thinking about today? Because that's what you've been living. The world around you is echoing back the tone you set in silence, and nothing will change until the thinking does. So if you want to heal your relationships, change your thinking about connection. If you want to find peace, change your thinking about the past. If you want to create abundance, change your thinking about worth. And if you want to love yourself, change your thinking about who you believe you are. It is never about adding more. It is always about subtracting the noise. You were born whole. You were born wise. You were born connected to the divine. And every thought that told you otherwise was an illusion borrowed from a world that forgot how to see. But today you remember, that is the beginning of everything. The moment you begin to observe your thinking without becoming it, something miraculous happens. A quiet space opens up between stimulus and response, between the noise of the world and the whisper of your soul. In that space lives your power not to react, but to choose, not to cling, but to release, not to fear, but to trust. And that single shift from automatic to aware begins to alter the very texture of your life. You stop being dragged by circumstance and start becoming guided by consciousness. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable and begin to align with what is eternal within you. There is no circumstance outside of you that holds more weight than the thoughts you are rehearsing inside you. You may not control what others do, what they say, or what has already happened, but you do control the meaning you assign to it. And meaning is everything. A thought of betrayal can become a teacher of boundaries. A thought of loss can become a doorway to gratitude. A thought of failure can become the seed of wisdom. It all depends on the thinker. You We've been conditioned to believe that happiness is circumstantial, that peace is a destination, that worth must be proven. But none of that is true. It never was. The outer world is merely the shadow cast by the shape of your thoughts. And when you sculpt those thoughts with love, with intention, with a gentle but firm sense of presence, the world reflects a beauty that was waiting all along. No spiritual teacher, no enlightened soul ever reached peace by rearranging the furniture of the world. They reached it by rearranging the architecture of their inner world. They learned to master the mind, to see through its tricks, to soften the grip of judgment, and to return again and again to the spaciousness of now. They did not wait for perfect conditions. They created a perfect perception. And that is the invitation for you. The quality of your life is shaped by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Not, why is this happening to me? But what is this showing me? Not, what do I lack? But, what is life trying to bring forward in me through this? The quality of your thinking is determined by your willingness to surrender the need to be right, to be certain, to be in control. Because real transformation does not come from control. It comes from trust. It comes from the surrender of false stories and the embrace of the sacred present. You were not born to ruminate in regret or spiral in worry. You were born to create. And your primary creation is the thought you allow to take root in your mind. That thought becomes emotion. That emotion becomes behavior. That behavior becomes character. And character becomes destiny. Trace it all back, and it begins with one silent seed, one thought. So plant well. Think of your thoughts as guests in the temple of your mind. Who are you letting in today? Who are you allowing to sit at the table of your awareness? Are they voices of fear or faith? Are they the voices of past wounds or present miracles? You are the gatekeeper. You are the master gardener. And whatever you nourish within will blossom in the world without. Do not underestimate this power. It is not a metaphor. It is spiritual law. Change the frequency of your thoughts, and you will alter the symphony of your life. This is not about positive thinking for the sake of ignoring pain. It is about conscious thinking that acknowledges pain but does not build a home inside it. It is about choosing the higher perspective, even when the lower one screams louder. It is about rising not because the world demands it, but because your soul remembers its wings. And yes, there will be days when the old thoughts return, when the inner critic bangs on the door, when the fog sets in again. That's okay. This is not a path of perfection. It is a path of presence. And presence is a practice. Every moment you return to your breath, every moment you observe without judgment, every moment you choose a higher thought that is victory, that is healing, that is awakening. Your thoughts are not who you are. They are passing weather systems in the vast sky of your being. Let them come, let them go, but don't let them build cities without your consent. Don't let them shape your life from unconscious repetition. You are not here to be a mirror of past programming. You are here to be a lighthouse, steady, awake, and rooted in truth. Let go of the belief that change begins outside of you. Let go of the belief that one day, when circumstances are just right, then you'll feel peace. The truth is simpler and more liberating. When you choose peaceful thoughts, your life becomes peaceful. When you think thoughts of compassion, you walk in compassion. When you honor yourself in thought, the world begins to honor you. It's not magic, it's alignment. And alignment begins when the mind remembers its servant role, not its master role. When the ego is seen clearly not as an enemy, but as a confused guide doing its best to protect you through fear. But you, dear soul, do not need to be protected by fear. You need to be liberated by truth. And the truth is this: your thinking shapes your frequency. And your frequency writes the melody your life will play. Then listen deeply now.
not just with your ears, but with the whole of your being, with the space behind your chest where the silence lives, with the gentle fire of awareness that never flickers, no matter how chaotic the world becomes. That space knows your life is not dictated by chance, nor is it controlled by fate. It is directed by the silent compass of your attention, and your attention always flows in the direction of your thoughts. Where your focus goes, your energy grows. Where your energy grows, your reality unfolds. And the seed of it all is thought. So if your life feels noisy, heavy, cluttered with conflict and confusion, the answer is not to rearrange the people around you or chase more distractions. The answer is to cleanse the temple of your mind. Dust off the old assumptions, wash away the fear-stained beliefs, open the windows of perception, and let the light of awareness pour in. Ask yourself, is this thought bringing me closer to freedom or further into suffering? That one question, asked honestly and gently, can save a lifetime of unnecessary pain. You do not need to believe every thought you think. You are not obligated to obey the voices that echo with limitation, fear, or doubt. You are allowed to pause, to breathe, to question. You are allowed to say, I no longer choose to live under that belief. And in that moment, chains begin to fall. Not the kind you see with your eyes, but the kind that have been weighing down your spirit for years. And that release, that sweet, invisible liberation, that is the soul beginning to remember itself. Many people are walking through life asleep to the miracle of their mind, asleep to the truth that heaven and hell are not places we go, but frequencies we choose. A thought of bitterness is a step toward hell. A thought of compassion is a step toward heaven. And these steps, taken moment by moment, build the path your feet will follow. Do not wait for a burning bush. Do not wait for thunder in the sky or a voice to break through the clouds. The voice is already inside you. It speaks in the silence. It speaks when you slow down long enough to hear the deeper questions. What am I rehearsing in my mind each day? What am I practicing with my inner dialogue? And does it serve the life I truly want to live? Because here is the hidden truth. You are always practicing something. Every thought you entertain, every judgment you accept, every fear you repeat, you are strengthening a pathway in your mind. That pathway becomes the direction of your life. So ask yourself, is this a path of light? Is this a path of freedom? Or am I unconsciously paving roads to old prisons? You are not broken. You are not behind. You are simply ready to awaken. That is why these words resonate. Not because they are new, but because they are ancient truths you've always known. Deep down, beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the expectations, your soul has always whispered, I am the thinker. I am the chooser. And I am free to choose again. Begin now. Begin today. Let this moment be the turning point, not the dramatic kind that needs lightning bolts or emotional fireworks, but the quiet kind where the soul simply stands up and says, no more thoughts that shrink me, no more stories that shame me, no more identities borrowed from pain. In their place, you begin to plant the seeds of clarity, of love, of worthiness. You begin to think as if life is on your side. You begin to believe that peace is not something to chase, but something to allow. You begin to live from the knowing that you are enough, not because you proved it, but because you remembered it. And that shift, subtle though it may be, is how miracles begin. Because when you change the way you think, you change the way you feel. When you change the way you feel, you change what you believe is possible. And when you change what you believe is possible, the universe rearranges itself to reflect that belief. Not because it was withholding, but because you were. You were withholding permission to receive because you didn't believe you were worthy. You were withholding love because you were afraid of being hurt. You were withholding peace because you thought chaos was your default setting. But now you begin to allow. And allowing begins with a thought. A single thought that whispers, what if the old story is not the truth? And once that thought enters, the whole house of illusion begins to shake. Because the mind that has built its home on fear cannot withstand the gentle wind of truth. That truth is simple. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not the voice that says you'll never make it. You are the awareness that hears that voice and chooses something higher. So today, choose again. Choose the thought that lifts you. Choose the thought that brings you back to stillness. Choose the thought that speaks to your future, not your fear. And when you forget, because you will simply remember that forgetting is part of remembering. Falling asleep is part of waking up. There is no shame in it, only grace. The quality of your life is not about what you have. It is not about what they think. It is about what you believe, what you nurture, what you entertain in the invisible world of your mind. And that is where your greatest work must begin, not in trying to force the external, but in softening, cleansing, and renewing the internal. Because when the internal world is healed, the external world becomes a mirror of that healing. And you become the light you were seeking. And when you become the light you were seeking, you stop chasing shadows. You stop grasping at empty promises wrapped in noise. You stop running from yourself because you finally realize there is nowhere to run. Everything you've ever wanted was already resting within the quiet space of your own being, waiting for your thoughts to align with its presence, not to earn it, but to see it, to see that your worth was never in question, only in recognition, that love was never absent, only obscured by the fog of conditioned belief. There is a profound shift that happens when you stop thinking in reaction and begin thinking in creation. When you stop allowing every passing fear to dictate your emotional climate and instead become the conscious author of your internal world. In that shift, you stop being a thermometer reacting to the temperature of the world, and you become the thermostat setting the tone of your life from the inside out. That is not philosophy, that is power. That is freedom, that is mastery. It doesn't happen by force, it happens by remembrance. And remembering is a sacred act. It's sitting in stillness long enough to hear the thoughts beneath the thoughts. It's breathing deeply enough to separate the truth from the trauma. It's choosing to become the observer instead of the reactor again and again until the old wiring begins to dissolve and a new way of being begins to rise. You cannot think your way to peace through judgment. You cannot think your way to love through resistance. But you can return always to a thought that is in harmony with who you truly are. A thought of grace, a thought of openness, a thought of I am already enough. And from that thought, a new vibration radiates outward, not in a shout, but in a silent frequency that draws new realities to your feet. Your job is not to fix the world. Your job is to think in alignment with truth and let the world respond to your alignment. That's how reality changes, not from resistance, but from resonance. If you don't like what life is reflecting, look not at the mirror, but at the face you're presenting to it. Change the internal pattern, and the reflection must follow. So many of us are addicted to fixing. We want to fix the job, the relationship, the circumstances. But rarely do we stop to examine the thinking that attracted those circumstances to begin with. And until that examination takes place, we find ourselves repeating the same storylines with different characters. Because the pattern was never out there, it was in here, in the thoughts we chose to believe, in the identities we wore like armor, in the narratives we never questioned. But now you see it. And with that seeing comes choice. And with choice comes healing. And with healing comes liberation. This is your turning point. Not because the stars have aligned, not because the world has suddenly become easier, but because you've decided to no longer abandon yourself with your thoughts. You've decided to no longer speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to another soul. You've decided to no longer give your power away to fleeting fears and old scripts. You've decided at last to come home to yourself. And home is not a place. It is a state of being. It is the vibration of love you allow yourself to rest in. It is the clarity that emerges when the mind softens. It is the deep, unwavering knowing that you are not here to be perfect, but to be whole. Not here to compete, but to contribute. Not here to survive, but to awaken. And awakening begins with thought. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, but subtle, consistent thoughts of truth. Thoughts like, I am not my past. I am not this fear. I am not a victim of circumstance. I am a divine being, temporarily inhabiting form. I am allowed to think new thoughts. I am allowed to release the old. I am allowed to create a new reality, starting now, and then you do. Not all at once, but moment by moment, thought by thought, and those small shifts begin to gather, like droplets that become a stream, a current, a river, and finally a sea of transformation. You look around and the world seems to smile back, not because it has changed, but because you have. Your thinking has softened, your frequency has elevated, and the quality of your life has become the natural result. And as you continue on this path, not forward, but inward, you begin to realize that life has always been speaking to you in the language of reflection. Not punishment, not reward, but feedback. It shows you again and again the quality of your thoughts made visible. If your world is chaotic, perhaps your inner world has been cluttered. If your days feel heavy, perhaps your thoughts have been weighted by beliefs that no longer serve you. This is not to blame, this is to empower. Because if thought created it, thought can change it. You are not here to control every outcome. You are here to master your inner response to each outcome. That mastery is not stoicism, it is sacred receptivity. It is the art of choosing peace without the need for perfection. It is the quiet strength of being grounded in awareness, no matter what storms may come. And that grounding begins with one sacred habit: choosing higher thoughts. This is not about positive thinking as a mask. This is about truthful thinking as a mirror. Thinking that does not pretend life is perfect, but sees clearly that you are not the victim of it. That even when you do not control the wind, you can still set your sail, and your thoughts are the sail. So when the day begins, ask yourself, what direction will I sail today? Will you drift with the currents of fear? Will you replay the grievances of yesterday and call it truth? Will you grip tightly to your judgments and call it strength? Or will you release, not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up? Waking up to the truth that your mind is not a prison unless you let it become one. Your power lies in awareness. Awareness that watches thought without clinging to it. Awareness that sees a fearful thought and smiles gently, saying, I hear you, but I do not follow you. Awareness that witnesses an old wound rising and says, I understand. And I choose to bless it, not repeat it. This is the quiet revolution, the inner uprising that changes everything not by force but by vision, by returning to the truth that thought is creative, not reactive, that your experience of life is not happening to you, but through you, through the lens of your beliefs, through the patterns of your focus, through the tone of your self-talk. Speak to yourself kindly, not because it's trendy, but because your cells are listening, your nervous system is listening, your energy field is listening, and every thought you repeat becomes a vibration in your body, a signal to your reality, a prophecy unfolding in silence. So speak with reverence, even when you're tired, even when you're unsure, especially when you're afraid. That is when the power of your thinking becomes sacred. That is when you step not into illusion, but into alignment, into truth, into love. Not love as sentiment, but love as vibration, love as clarity. Love as the refusal to think thoughts that betray your divinity. Let your thinking become a prayer, not with folded hands, but with an open mind. Let every thought be a candle lit in the dark room of unconsciousness. Let your inner dialogue reflect your divine inheritance, not your conditioned past. You are not here to rehearse wounds. You are here to remember wholeness. And when you forget, as we all do, return again. Return to the breath, return to the stillness, return to the observer within you who has never been harmed, never been afraid, never been less than divine. That witness within you is your anchor. And when your thinking returns to that awareness, the world begins to respond in kind. You may notice people treating you differently. You may find synchronicities arriving with more ease. You may watch as what once felt like effort begins to feel like flow. This is not coincidence. This is coherence. Coherence between who you are, how you think, and what you allow yourself to feel. And when that coherence is present, miracles are not rare, they are natural. Because miracles are not events. They are perceptions. They are shifts in thinking from fear to love, from lack to trust, from separation to unity. And the more often you allow that shift in the quiet space of your mind, the more your entire life becomes a sanctuary of grace. You were never broken. You were only believing broken thoughts. You were never unworthy. You were only echoing unworthy beliefs. You were never disconnected. You were only distracted. And now you remember. You remember that every thought is a paintbrush, and your life is the canvas. Paint with intention. Paint with vision. Paint with love. Because the masterpiece of your life is not made with your hands, it's made with your mind. Then let us keep walking gently, steadily, down this sacred path of remembering. Because remembering who you are is not a grand announcement, not a mountaintop moment with trumpets and crowds. It is a soft return, a humble realignment with the center of your being. And that return begins with a single conscious thought. I no longer choose to think in opposition to my soul. You see, the soul doesn't argue. It doesn't scream. It doesn't compete for your attention. It simply waits quietly, faithfully, lovingly beneath the chatter of the mind. And when your thinking finally slows, when you stop rehearsing the noise long enough to be still, you feel it. That calm, sacred knowing, that presence that cannot be described, only experienced. That is who you are beneath the thoughts. But most people never meet that presence because they are too busy managing a mind that was never taught how to rest. A mind trained in survival, not serenity. A mind so addicted to solving problems that it forgets the greatest solution is often surrender. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control your thinking through force, the more chaotic it becomes. Because the ego loves a fight, but the soul whispers, there is nothing to fight. There is only something to release. So release it. Release the idea that your thoughts define you. Release the belief that your worth must be earned. Release the illusion that peace is conditional. And in that releasing, you begin to rise, not with effort, but with ease. Because the heavy thoughts fall away, and what remains is light. And what is light always remembers how to rise. The quality of your life, beloved, is not about the things you can accumulate, not about the titles you can achieve, not even about the milestones you cross. The quality of your life is about the quality of your presence. And presence is the gift you give yourself when your thoughts no longer drag you away from the now. In this moment here, now there is no problem. There is only breath. There is only being. And there is the choice right here to think a thought that brings you closer to peace, a thought that opens the window rather than slams the door, a thought that loves instead of judges, a thought that forgives instead of punishes, a thought that lifts instead of locks. And yes, you are allowed to choose those thoughts, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because those are the moments that shape the landscape of your life. Anyone can think beautifully when things are easy, but to think lovingly in the face of fear, to think kindly when the world is cruel, to think abundantly when the bank account says otherwise, that is the true power of spiritual maturity. That is the fire of awakened thinking. That is the light that cannot be put out by circumstance. You are not your old reactions. You are not your unconscious habits. You are not your childhood programming. You are not your inner critic. You are not your inherited shame. You are not the wounds of your lineage. You are the sky that holds it all. You are the space between the thoughts. You are the stillness beneath the storm. And in that stillness, you are free. From this stillness, begin again. Begin thinking in the language of truth. I am here. I am whole. I am aligned. I am willing. I am enough. You don't need the world to agree with you to think in alignment with love. You don't need proof to think in alignment with abundance. You don't need apologies to think in alignment with forgiveness. The outer world does not need to shift first. You do. And once you do, the world, as if by divine reflection, follows. Not always instantly, not always in the ways you expect, but always faithfully, because your outer world is a delayed reflection of your inner devotion. So devote yourself to thoughts that heal, to thoughts that build, to thoughts that honor your sacredness. Devote yourself to thinking like someone who knows they are connected to Source, because you are. You always have been. No thought can sever that connection. But every thought can either obscure it or reveal it. Choose the thoughts that reveal. Choose the thoughts that set you free. Choose the thoughts that invite miracles. Because when the quality of your thinking rises, your whole life becomes a reflection of heaven lived on earth. And the door to that heaven is always unlocked. You simply need to think your way home. Then let us in, not with noise, but with a whisper, the kind that reaches deeper than any shout ever could. Your life is not waiting on the outside, it is blooming from the inside. You are not here to collect thoughts like trophies or chase perfection through the mind. You are here to think in alignment with the truth you already are. So pause, breathe, and remember, the quality of your life is the quality of the thoughts you nurture when no one else is listening. Choose thoughts that return you to peace. Choose thoughts that remember your wholeness. Choose thoughts that make room for grace. And when in doubt, choose love. Because the most powerful thought you will ever think is, I already am. And from that knowing, everything changes forever.